Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins.
Dan, finding the right people is especially hard for small business leaders. Rebecca Barns-Hogg has written an excellent book. I know because I just finished reading it last night on how to rethink human resources. Her book is called The Yolo Principle, and she is here now to discuss it with us. Rebecca, welcome to the program.
Hi, Don. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being a guest on your show.
Well, Rebecca, tell us first a little bit about your background, a little bit about why you wrote the book, and then the basic premise of your book, and we'll go from there.
All right, sure. I am an HR professional. I got there by a long and winding path. When I first got out of high school a long time ago, I wasn't sure where I wanted to go with my life and what I want to do, and not so different from a lot of people today. So I took my time and tried out a few different industries and worked in a number of different companies, both small and large, and found that throughout that whole process, the way businesses operated were just particularly fascinating to me. And as I went back into college, I got a degree in business administration and kind of touched upon all of the aspects of running a business, from operations to a little bit of marketing to technology and computers, operations, you name it. I kind of touched on it a little bit here and there. And what I found through that entire process was I was most skilled and most interested in the people part of it and how the right people could have a significant impact on the success of a business. So that sent me back to school to get a master's in human resources management and took my career through the ranks of executive level HR positions. And through all of those, I really enjoy the process of correcting the misalignment in how we were recruiting and hiring for the jobs in our organizations, and working with both the candidates and the hiring managers to fix that process, to get people on the same page in alignment, and to look at a more global view of that hiring process than what had been traditionally done in the past. And that led me to creating my own business about 7 or 8 years ago, where I focused in on primarily the small business market, because that is where most of the job creation happens in our economy, but it's also where the hiring process is done the least, I guess I don't like the grammar of this, the least well. Like, people don't do it well at that small business level because they don't have that expertise within their business. And that led me to write the book, The Yolo Principle. And it's really not anything that you probably haven't heard these concepts in one way, shape, or form or another. But what I did is I brought them together in a little different perspective in terms of how you apply these principles to the way you hire staff for your business. And the principles are really, I call them the 4 C's. They're clarity, culture, communication, and consistency. And those 4 terms I define and give a lot of examples about how you use them in your business and really drive your hiring process to align the people you hire with your organization's culture, mission, vision, and values. Because when you have people who share those same attitudes, those same beliefs, those same goals, that's where you really get the magic in small business. And that's what I love. That's what really drives me and keeps me going, is connecting people to the organizations that need them.
But how did you come across the title, The Yolo Principle?
It's kind of a life philosophy of mine. YOLO stands for you only live once. And throughout my career, I worked with a lot of really smart people. And those smart people were often miserable because they were in the wrong jobs. And I just always felt that, you have one life to live. You should enjoy every moment of it, or at least as much of it as you can. And I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I want to go to work today and be annoying and impossible and hard to work with. I think most of us want to go to work and do things we enjoy with people we enjoy working with and know that our work has some value and meaning. And for me, the Yolo Principle was about that. It was about creating that meaning in your life and your work and the ability to tie the two together because they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Well, I'm going to ask one more question and turn it over to Dan. But I would like to agree with your philosophy. I don't personally because I worry about so many things. But I guess my question to you is, many of us have to have a job, and sometimes we get stuck in situations where we're in essence dreading going to work every day. What do you say to these people?
I think if you were in a situation where you dread going to work every day, it's not the job for you. And sometimes we get locked in our own pain and our own situation that we forget that we always have a choice. And staying in a job we don't enjoy is a choice. Now, sometimes the choices we have to make are painful. And there were many times in my career where I took a salary cut or I took a position that had a really long commute or some other unpleasant aspect because I wanted to enjoy what I wanted to do, that I wanted to have that belief in the work that I was doing, that it mattered, that I was valued. And for the people who are in those positions where they don't want to go to work any morning, where the situation isn't a good one to be in, I think it's time to examine the choices that they're making and come up with a plan. Like, you may not be able to financially just to walk out of a job without having another one, but you can plan and you can put together a way out so that you can move from that pain point where you currently are to a place where you're going to enjoy your job and work on work that you find challenging and interesting, and with people that also challenge you to be better.
Dan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. The challenges for entrepreneurs like Donald and myself, who are small businesses and basically work for ourselves and may occasionally interface with gig talent to do a particular project. We're basically one-man shops, and that is a huge percentage of the small businesses in the United States. One or less than 10 employees and single employees, I think, is a very high percentage of the small business in the country. And as I have done my work in doing consulting and also working on Wall Street for 40-some years and still there in managing money for people, what I think sometimes we do is that the job becomes the scapegoat for other things that are going on in our life that makes us unhappy when we walk out the door. Not to where we're going, but we're walking out of the door. And I say to people, if you bring your baggage to the office, you won't be very productive at the office. What do you think about that?
I think that's absolutely true. That happens a lot, and it is a skill set that people need to develop to be able to have that balance. And I'm not a big fan of that work-life balance terminology, but I think it's more these days, it's more about integrating your work and your personal life, because technology keeps us always on. And because of that, it's hard to have that separation that we might have had in the past. So I think it's more about how do you integrate your life and your work so that they each support each other. And if you have issues, going on in your personal life, then, larger companies are able to offer programs that can support helping you fix those issues or work through them or whatever that might look like. In a smaller organization, though, I think it's a little harder to do that. And I think that's where one of my Yolo principles comes in to play, and that's the communication aspect of it. And being able to communicate what you're going through outside of work to the people you work with so that they can support you through that is, I think, something that's often overlooked as a way out of that disconnect that's happening.
I don't think I would disagree with that. I'm curious, though, just to give you an illustration. I'm a writer, and some people say I'm a prolific writer. I write thrillers, I write children's books, I write commentary, current events for 8 different blogs. And I never had any training as a writer except for 4 classes that I took here at the community center here on Sanibel 6 years ago. And but in that very first class, that woman said to me, who was the teacher, "You will find out whether or not you can be a writer within 2 weeks." And I said to her, I can't imagine how I could make a determination that I could be a writer in 2 weeks, because I can't even make changes in my golf swing in 2 weeks. The reason I tell you that story is to lead to a question. In your experience, how quickly does a person figure out I'm in the wrong job?
I think you can figure it out on day one. And I had that happen in my career. I went into day one of a job. The company that I was there to work for was not prepared for my arrival. The person who had hired me had been let go the Friday before, and no one told me that before I showed up for work on Monday. I was introduced as the HR lady. Later on in the day, I was told that the only reason I was there is because the lawyers said they had to hire someone like me. So it was not the job that I thought that I was going into. So I knew right away, day one, that this was the wrong job for me. So I had a choice. It goes back to what I said before. My job that I had left to go there, they had filled my position. So that I couldn't go back, and I wasn't happy there, so I didn't really want to go back. And now I'm in a position where I have a job that I know isn't going to be right for me. So I started planning immediately. What can I do to make this work at least for a couple of years? Because I didn't want to, immediately leave and have that gap in employment and that sort of thing. And I looked at, how can I turn this situation into an opportunity? And what I ended up doing is some of those very people who did not want me there and only tolerated me because the lawyers said they had to, have become my biggest supporters, my cheerleading group. Still 15 years later, come back to me for advice when it concerns human resources, hiring, employee relations, and things of that nature. So I think even though you may be able to quickly figure out in the first hours, days, or weeks whether or not this job is right for you, you also have to remember that there are choices involved, and you can choose to look at that as a bad thing, or you can choose to look at it as a good thing and an opportunity. And there's a book out, I can't remember the name of the author off the top of my head, but it's called A Beautiful Constraint. And it's looking for those opportunities when you come across obstacles. And I think that is an awesome way to approach problems in life, in business, wherever you might find them, as not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity. And what can you turn that obstacle into? And find that silver lining, if you want to use that kind of terminology.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that what you're proposing is a fundamental shift in American life? And I say it. I clarify my question by saying, in my parents' generation, I'm a baby boomer. In my parents' generation, coming out of the Depression, a job was a wonderful thing to have. If you're a husband and you're married and you've got children, to be able to put food on the table was a primary responsibility of the father in the household. And the primary responsibility of the wife in the household was the raising of the children and taking care of the household. We know that over the ensuing years after the Second World War, that women came more and more into the workforce and were equally contributing, I shouldn't say equally, but contributing to the household income in order to be able to do certain things. And I'm wondering, is the concept of happiness, a word that you used several times, a new lexicon that my parents' generation and probably a lot of generations before that was not something that they were thinking about?
I would slightly disagree with that. I think they thought about, because I'll back up here a little bit. I'm also the tail end of the baby boomers. So my parents had come through that Depression, post-World War II era as well. My mother didn't work until I was a teenager, and my father was always the sole supporter of the family. But what I saw from them was there was a kind of I will say a dual focus. The happiness within the family was where they put their focus. Work was a means to that end. And I'll clarify that a little bit more in that my family didn't have a lot of money. There was always, the paycheck to paycheck. Will we have enough money to buy clothes and supplies for school and, those kinds of things. But I
Pay
never
college tuition.
felt, and in fact, that's why I didn't go to college straight out of high school, is because there wasn't that financial support available from my parents. And I think today's generation are extremely lucky that they have parents who have planned ahead and, have that that financial cushion for them in terms of helping them pay for college. I didn't have that opportunity. So all of my education was done while I worked days full-time and done part-time at night. And the concept of happiness, I think, came in is when I was growing up, I had no idea we were poor. It just never crossed my radar. We never wanted for, we had food, we had shelter, we had clothing. Did I have the latest fashion? Probably not, but it wasn't something that was a focus. It wasn't a material thing that contributed to happiness. For us, it was more about, having family time together, learning, supporting each other, things that are probably less easy to measure. But I think that focus in that generation was there. It's just not as, front and center, I guess, as maybe it is today. And I think today's generation, the millennials, I think, get a bad rap. But we also have to say we raised that generation. So if they're getting a bad rap, that's a reflection on us and our parenting. It's not a reflection on the generation. But there are still a lot of similarities, because I remember my parents saying to me, and you probably do as well, is you don't know what hard work is. You've never had to do this or whatever it might be. And we still say that to our kids. So I think that maybe our concepts of what happiness is maybe have changed and evolved, and technology, I think, plays a huge part in that. And how we use that technology can either make us happier or make us move further apart. So I'm not sure that was a good answer to your question, but
it's an answer. That's fair. So let me pursue it a little further. What you said about our parents' generation that material things were not as important as they might be with our children today, and in that the idea that success is measured in some quarters, in some businesses, of the car you drive, the watch you have on your wrist, and what clubs you belong to. And I would grant that that's perhaps a diminishing percentage of the population. But I want to go back to this issue of happiness, because what I don't understand is that if we are trying to make ourselves happier, then why do we have such an astronomical divorce rate in this country? That families are coming apart. Where did the happiness go? If the divorce rate when our parents were alive was probably much lower than the divorce rate today. Now, I understand there was a moral philosophy. If you were married, you stayed married. If it was a bad marriage, you still stayed married, and you didn't get divorced. But now we have maybe as much as 40% of all marriages end up in divorce, and it's kind of leveled off. It hasn't got. And so if we're not going back to my original comment, if we're not happy at home when we walk out the door, isn't it hard to be happy in our work environment?
Well, first I want to kind of back up. I'm not an expert on marriage and divorce. I focus primarily on helping businesses hire the people they need. So
Mm-hmm.
I think,
and I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay, sure.
I'm going to interrupt you, Rebecca, because we're running out of time, and I want to get back to tell us how your book can help small business in their hiring process, because we only have a few minutes left, and I want to get that in because I think that's part of what makes your book so good.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the discussion around happiness, and I think it's important because happy people are typically your better, more engaged employees. And that's the basis of the Yolo Principle, which is to help organizations find those people who are going to be happy in their work. Now, when I created the book, the 4 principles I talked about earlier were clarity, culture, consistency, and communication. And using those 4 principles as the basis for the hiring that you do. And the most important thing there, I think, is the clarity piece, is to know exactly what you need before you start looking at it. So you have to know what these people need to do, what kind of results are you expecting from them, and then how is that going to relate to the organizational culture? And your business, whether you want to admit it, has a personality, whether you intentionally create that or it's created by the employees who work there on its own. And that's an important factor to consider in your business. In fact, one of the early readers of my book said, after reading that and understanding the role of culture in hiring, I realized that's why 4 of the 5 people that we hired never worked out, is because they didn't share our culture. They didn't share the right personality, the right mindsets, the right attitudes. So once you know what that is, you have the clarity about the job, what the person is going to do. You have the clarity about what your culture is, what your business stands for, what are your core values, what's important to you. Then you can start communicating that and using that in your hiring processes. And you can also design your process to surface that information from candidates so that they understand what you're about just as much as you understand their story. So it's about making sure that everyone has that alignment in terms of what expectations are. And I have a number of tools and techniques in the book. There are lots of templates and resources that help you figure that out. So if you don't know what your culture is, I have some really quick and easy ways to help you figure that out. If you don't know how to find that information when you interview, I have a whole chapter on how to interview and how to ask what I call insightful interview questions so that you can really get to the heart of who a person is and be able to know whether or not they'll be a good fit. And using this process, I've had clients come back to me and say, I can't believe I've done it the other way for so long. This way was much easier. I'm more confident. And the people that I've hired using this system have performed better and stuck with me. In fact, one of the very first hires I did as when I went out on my own, and I'm also a solopreneur like you, it's just me in this business, is still with the company 7 years later that I placed her in. And this was a position that was typically high turnover, and she stuck with it, and she's been promoted and has become a valuable contributing employee for this organization. So it works,
Rebecca,
and it's not difficult.
I hate to cut you off. Tell us the name of your book because we're run out of time.
Sure. It's called The Yolo Principle, the Ultimate Hiring Guide for Small Business, and it's available on theyoloprinciple.com, and you can also get it on Amazon, and there is a Kindle version as well.
We've been talking with Rebecca Barns-Hogg. We thank you so much for being with us, Rebecca.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Dan. I've enjoyed being here.
Thank you for your insight. It was very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Welcome back to Recalculating, the program dedicated to American small business.
Dan, I'm really looking forward to our next guest because, amongst other things, has just closed a new round of investment. Trina Spear is with us today. She is co-founder of a medical apparel company, FIGS, which just raised $65 million in its most investment round. Trina, welcome to the program. I've got a lot of questions. First one is, tell us about your company and how it was founded and what it does.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Trina Spear from FIGS. And what we're doing is really transforming the medical apparel industry. It's an industry that's been around for a long time, about 100 years, and hasn't had any change or innovation. And what we're doing is changing how things are done and changing the way medical professionals not only, the product that they wear to work every day, their medical uniform, but also changing how they shop for it. We founded the company because we saw a massive opportunity. My co-founder was with a girlfriend of hers who was a nurse practitioner and was wearing awful scrubs. And she said, what are you wearing? Those are really bad. And she said, well, these are all that's out there. And what we did was we spent a lot of time looking at the industry and saw that there weren't any great options on the product front, and no one was going direct to the medical professional. So those were really the two problems that we aimed to solve. And now our broader mission is to serve those who serve others, which medical community is large. And what we're doing is really taking a step back and seeing all the ways in which we could help a community that we feel has been underserved, and give them a better option.
But Trina, how did you change the medical apparel industry? Do you do it online? How did they do it before you, and now how are they doing it? Thanks to your company, which is called FIGS.
Sure. So the first way in which we're doing it is the product. So before us, medical apparel was primarily made of cotton, ill-fitting, uncomfortable, not functional, and no fabric technology, which is a big focus of ours. So on that front, we create the highest quality medical apparel in the world with a true focus on fit, on functionality, on true fabric technology. So we're the first company to really create an antimicrobial fabric that lasts the lifetime of the garment. Everything we do is wrinkle resistant. It's stain repellent. It has four-way stretch, yoga waistbands, kind of everything that you need to go to work and do your job well. And then the second problem that we solved was the fact that everything was sold through third-party distributors, discount aggregated brick-and-mortar scrub stores, discount aggregated online sites. And the industry is really a B2C industry. 90% of medical professionals buy their own uniforms. So all of these companies that were selling scrubs were selling it through mom-and-pop retail stores and strip malls where there's a rack of black, a rack of navy, a rack of white. Really a horrible experience, and we were the first company to go direct online to the medical professional, delivering them not only a better product but also a better experience.
So in effect, you're giving people a wider selection, more colors, better fit, and you're doing it online. Would that sum it up?
Yeah, and I think the key point is actually more functional, right? So more colors and styles, that's great. That really hits on the fashion piece, but we don't view ourselves as a fashion company. We're not a trend. We're a function company. So giving the medical community performance wear that repels bacteria, similar to your hiking gear, your skiing gear. It is functional. It helps you actually perform in your job a lot better than the current options.
But do you also, is your prices less than you would pay at your local store, or about the same?
We're a bit higher, but if you look at the value that you're getting, what you're getting for that cost, it's night and day because we sell direct. So we don't have to pay distributor fees to levels and levels of distributors like our competitors do.
I have a lot of questions, but I know Dan does as well.
Thank you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Fascinated with your business model. You raised $65 million. What are you going to do with it?
So we're investing a lot in data analytics, really understanding our community better so that we can deliver exactly what they want when they want it. I think there's been a shift in retail and a shift in, brick and mortar stores, as you've seen with companies like Macy's and JCPenney, and a lot of these traditional retailers are going out of business and going bankrupt. And they're being, the industry has shifted to an online world, an e-commerce world, but there's a lot more to that. And we kind of are at the forefront of building and innovating, not only in our space in the medical apparel industry, but also in e-commerce in general, and really building technology to understand exactly, for instance, if there's an RN, a registered nurse in Boston, and she works at Mass General Hospital, what colors does she wear? What, does she need these types of pockets? And how often does she buy? How often does she need to replenish her uniform? I think the world is shifting to one that was, subscription models of, hey, order your razors and your diapers and your soap every month. But in reality, people don't shop like that. They shop when they want, and how can we build actually a replenishment model to understand exactly when our consumers need to replenish, not just offer them something not necessarily when they want it and how they want it.
Do you have a problem, or maybe that's the wrong word, is there a challenge in your online model offering variety that, if I understand you, you say that the medical professional is buying their own uniforms or their own clothes. Do the hospitals have any say in what they can wear? About
40% of hospitals dictate color, but because they don't pay for it, and the industry's really shifted. And then, the late 80s, before the 80s, hospitals would buy on behalf of all their employees, and then budgets constrained, and they said we no longer can do that. So with that change, when you're not paying for something, you can't really dictate how people are going to acquire their uniforms. So the main thing is they want everyone to look professional. So they might say, hey, we're all going to wear navy, or we're all going to wear black. But beyond that, there's no real regulation or standards that hospitals can dictate for the majority of 90% of medical professionals.
How long have you been in business?
We've been in business for about 5 years.
And how has your sales growth been over the 5 years?
Tremendous. We've grown significantly over the past 5 years, and I think it's really that we identified this opportunity and really care about this community. We've grown significantly in the past 2 years alone. We've grown over 17 times.
Wow. So do you make the uniforms here in the United States, or are they exported in?
So we have a really sophisticated supply chain. We actually have innovation labs in Taipei and in Tokyo and in Shanghai. So everything we do starts at the yarn level, which is also a distinction between us and everybody else. We are weaving our own greige, which is undyed fabric, into dyed fabric, into our finished goods. Our labs are mainly in China. Our finished goods come from Peru, from Tokyo, from all over the world, really. We really look to partner with the best manufacturers, the best mills, to create the highest quality uniforms. And, so it's really about partnering with the best who share our values and building the most robust, sophisticated supply chain in the world.
It would seem to me, based on what you were saying earlier with Don, that prior to your entry into the marketplace was highly fractured. No one organization or group had a predominant market share if a lot of us sold by mom and pops in local markets. You apparently have changed that, but in a market, the market for medical professionals to buy your uniforms, what's the size of the potential market?
Sure. So the industry is about $10 billion in the United States. It's about $60 billion globally. And you're right. I mean, the distributors are highly fragmented, but the manufacturers are not. So, I mean, that's what really creates the opportunity, is that there's all these manufacturers that are, mainly manufacturing in the worst factories in the world in India and Bangladesh, and they're selling to these distributors, and they don't understand the customer, right? There's no feedback loop between, who's making the stuff and who's selling the stuff. So we're the first vertically integrated brand to say, hey, we not only can take your feedback and get to know you really well, we also can then filter that back into our design and our manufacturing to continually improve on our garments.
So if the industry domestically is $10 billion, how many people does that involve?
There's about 24 million medical professionals in the U.S., and that, all wearing scrubs and lab coats and kind of everything that we offer across our collections.
And I'll ask one last question, and I'll turn it back to Don. What's your percentage of market share, would you think?
It's relatively low. I mean, I would say that, the industry is, it's large. We're growing rapidly, as I've described, but, there's a big runway in front of us, which is why we are investing so much in the back end, in technology, in systems, to bring, improved technology, improved design, better customer experience, which is an area that we focus a lot on, better communication. I think, we don't think in market share because the industry is also growing, and we're changing the way it works. So I think, when you're changing markets, market share sometimes becomes irrelevant.
Yeah. Don, back to you.
Well, no, many years ago, I hate to say how many, I was brought in by the Port of New York Authority to help an Egyptian cotton company figure out what to do with their cotton here. They want to export their cotton. And one of the things we came up with was surgical and hospital gowns. And for the next 15 years, this company did very well selling into that marketplace. It was cheaper for them to make them in just outside of Cairo and bring them into the States. And they got veteran administration contracts, etc. But ultimately, for a variety of reasons, they withdrew from the market. And so I know just enough about this marketplace to be dangerous. But why have not the bigger medical suppliers gotten into this at the level that you have?
Yeah, no, I think it's a function of the industry and the way it's evolved. I mean, I think a lot of these companies have been around for a long time, 40, 50, 60 years. And, at one point they were selling to the hospitals. And then when, the industry shifted from a B2B industry to a B2C industry, they shifted their B2B model from selling to hospitals to selling to retailers. And it's very hard to build a direct-to-consumer company, very hard to build an e-commerce company, especially when you have been around for a very long time and don't understand, the digital world, and don't have sales and marketing teams, right? It's a completely different business selling to enterprise versus selling to direct-to-consumer. And because of the way the industry works, the other point is that when you sell to these distributors, the larger ones, there are a few larger ones, you cannot sell direct online. You can't sell direct in your own stores. It's a little bit true of what fashion was 40 years ago. If you were a company like Vince or Theory or Rag & Bone and you sold to Saks Fifth Avenue or to Bloomingdale's, you couldn't sell online directly because of the conflict there. And that's still true in our industry. And that's the other interesting thing is that none of these larger billion-dollar companies are willing to turn off their bread and butter cash of selling to these distributors to then go direct, right? It's a huge risk for them, and they don't understand the world that we play in. So that's also what helps us a lot.
That being the case, my other question is, in other disruptive instances, and I think you are the reason we invited you on this program is because we believe you are a disruptive force. The disruption has been done by also undercutting the price. But if I heard you correctly, you're actually a little bit more expensive. Could you go into your reasoning on that a little bit?
Sure. I think this concept of disrupting via price is one that's been talked about a lot, but isn't as sustainable, right? Because you disrupt with price and then somebody else comes in and disrupts with price, and it's basically a chase to the bottom, right? You could see that across the phone industry, across the real estate businesses, in a variety of industries. So I think what we're doing is disrupting through product, and product is a much better disruptor than price because it's harder to compete with, right? When you're owning your supply chain and building yarn and fabric from scratch, and building, key components that are very hard to copy. So, by everybody in our industry is competing on price, right? It's a discount industry. It's hey, we have 50% off, we have 70% off. And what we're really doing is something, similar to like a Lululemon, where we're actually offering a much better product and a much better experience. And yes, we're going to charge you a little bit more, but you're willing to pay for it because it's that much better. And finally, you have something that you want to wear to work and something that makes you feel good and look good and changes how you operate in your job. So I think in the future, and I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, product is going to be the differentiator amongst companies and not price.
Well, let me ask you this. Before, healthcare institutions used to buy the uniforms for their staff so that they could have a uniformity and also hopefully get a volume discount. Are you primarily selling to like the independent nurse practitioner or the small office audience? Are you also going out for the big contracts, say to Brigham Hospital in Boston, which, if I remember the figure correctly, bought 4,000 uniforms years ago when I first got into this? Obviously, a big order like that would be worthwhile. But where do you go in your marketing?
Yes, so we sell direct to the medical professional, to nurses, to doctors, to dentists, to gynecologists, plastic surgeons, kind of directly to the medical professional. That being said, a small portion of our sales are, groups come to us. Brigham Women's actually came to us and said, we want to order for these 4 departments, or we have a group within our hospital, or, a medical office in Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills says, hey, we want to order on behalf of our staff. So we do that as well, but 90% plus of our business is direct online to the medical professional.
Dan, I'm finding it fascinating, but I'm sure you have some more questions.
Well, yeah, I do. I'm fascinated at you. When you started the business, did you decide? The reason why I'm asking the question is that we have a large percentage of the business owners that we interview on this show made the conscious decision that their best chance of success was going to be internet, not bricks and mortar. I'm assuming since you don't have a brick and mortar operation, was that also part of your discussion 5 years ago that where we want to go with this company is it's going to be an e-commerce model, and we don't ever see a need for creating bricks and mortar?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk around now moving not just brick and mortar and not just e-commerce to this omni-channel approach where you have that mix of both brick and mortar and online, and they are symbiotic with each other and help each other grow. For us, we were very focused early on being an e-commerce company. I think when you have a store on a corner of a street, you're limited, right? You're limited to the people that live nearby. And that's a huge, I think, when you're trying to build a big business like we are, very hard to do when you have 1 store or even 10 stores. So for us, scale was really important. Getting to helping and solving problems for medical professionals across the country was really important to us, and the way to do that is digitally. That being said, in the future we might open brick and mortar as a complement to everything that we do online. And I think that's what you've seen even with Warby Parker and now with Everlane and with a bunch of other what's called digitally native brands that have started online and then moved to open stores over time. But
you made a very keen observation about Macy's and a bunch of other retail big box stores who are shrinking, and in their evolution they saw what was happening with retail sales online and tried to create a presence online to compete with the Amazons of the world as online sellers. And yet culturally it was a conflict for them between online selling and bricks and mortar. And one would have to conclude, based on the activities which you've talked about, of them closing hundreds and hundreds of stores, the conflict of bricks and mortar and online, it would appear that those that have survived are the ones who are moving away from bricks and mortar and more to an online, so that it would seem to me that that would have some influence of why a successful e-tailer like yourself would ever want to go to build a bricks and mortar store.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I agree with you that e-commerce has become, in many ways, more cost efficient, in many ways more scalable. But it's also, challenging. Digital marketing and doing it, online is also challenging. And there are definitely pros of having a store that in some ways is actually cheaper than building a business online. But I think what happened with, I think you have to look at also the other aspect of it, right? When you're a third-party distributor selling other brands, that's also kind of not as attractive anymore. People want to buy from the brand selling its merchandise. They want to buy from vertically integrated brands where they have a connection and they feel that company is being authentic, right? If you're selling one brand, there's an authenticity there. And when you're going into Macy's and there's hundreds and hundreds of brands, that experience is just not as compelling anymore. So if, you have to break it out. Brick and mortar versus e-com, sure, but also third-party distributor of lots of brands versus one brand selling one product, like Warby Parker, like Everlane, like FIGS, like a company like Outdoor Voices, which is also brick and mortar and online. So,
Right.
I think customers are looking for authenticity. They're looking for vertically integrated companies where there's one mission and one they stand for something, and that's also hurt the large department store model.
Don, do I have time for one more question?
We got time, yes, for two.
Okay. So I'm very fascinated with your business model. You did I hear you correctly? You think there are about 25 million people in this space that you could sell to?
In the U.S., I mean, there's 10 times as many around the world.
Do you do business outside the U.S.?
We do not. We're solely based in the United States as of now.
Okay. So how do you, in a business that's, as we talked earlier, highly fractured, how do you go about acquiring buyers?
Acquiring buyers, right? So you're talking about individuals
Customers.
that buy on our site.
Yeah.
So
How do you get them?
I think it's not. Yes, we do digital marketing, right? A Facebook ad, right? That's a great way to acquire customers. But more importantly, offline marketing is really important to us. So although we don't have any brick and mortar stores, we do an event at a hospital. Every Friday, we're at a different hospital in Los Angeles giving free coffee to every nurse and doctor that walk in the hospital. Now, the minute I acquire, if you want to use that term, acquire a customer that works, let's say, at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, she walks into her unit, dermatology unit, let's say, and now everyone in that wing kind of sees FIGS and says, hey, where do you get your scrubs? And there's a really strong viral effect to what we do. Hospitals are a little bit like college campuses, where the minute somebody knows about FIGS, not only are they not ordering under their uniform because, why go back to the old way, but now there's a bunch of new people within that group, that all want to look alike, that all want to look professional, that all want to look like a team, that are now coming to our site, wearfigs.com, to buy their uniforms. So that viral effect is super important to what we do.
So you have an online presence, but you have an in-hospital presence to acquire customers.
Yes. I mean, a lot of it's also via social media, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, it's not just one thing. We do a lot. We do a lot in terms of conferences. We do hospital events. We do nurse parties. We have a speaker series at our company. We are also engaging with our community on a whole host of different ways, via our blog, via a lot of different ways on our website. So I think it's holistic when you think about also the difference between like kind of the older school mentality of brick and mortar versus online. When you're a digital company, there's just so many different ways to connect. with your community, and we are actively and continuously finding new ways to connect.
Don, back to you.
Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time with Trina Spear. Trina, your website again and how people can reach you?
Sure. Our website is wearfigs, wearfigs.com. That's probably the best way to, find us and try out our uniforms.
Well, thank you so much. I know I speak for Dan when I say it's a fascinating concept and a fascinating company, and we're so glad you came and joined us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me, Dan, tell me about your latest book.
My current book that's coming out, I should say, is Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? And it's really the first book written for children between the ages of 9 and 12 and their families, dealing with dementia. Dementia is a growing problem with the elderly in the United States and around the world, and we are not very well informed about what's going on, what's happening. So I wrote this book in the form of a mystery. And I have two little girls, 9 and 12, who have a magical power to seem to be able to find things that are lost. And so they go to their dads and moms and they say, we work all over the neighborhood helping people find things, and we seem to find things. And their dad says, yes, you have a magical talent to do that. And they said, we'd like to start a business to see if we can help other people. So they decided to start a business. The two girls' names are Hudson and Charlotte. And they start H&C's Lost and Found. If you've lost it, we find it. And so they build a business, and they convince the dads to build them an office and a treehouse in the backyard. And they get busy making posters and flyers trying to get customers. And their dads take them downtown, and they put them in the windows and on the telephone poles and light poles. And they go home, and first week goes by, and nobody comes. And the second week and third week, and nobody comes. They're really, really dejected. And the fourth week comes, and there's a knock at the door. And they walk over and open the door, and there's a young man standing there with one of their flyers in his hands. And he says to them, my dad says the reason why my Grammy can't remember me is because she's lost her memory. And your flyer says you find things that are lost. Can you find my Grammy's memory? Well, they don't know anything about memory. So they take his name and they go see their dads to see what can happen. And the story evolves into how they learn about what dementia is and what's going on in the body when somebody has dementia. And then they decide, while they can't find their customer's memory, they can help him build the tools to retain her in his memory. And so at the end of the book, there are about 10 to 12, 13 things that families can do together to work on to preserve the memory of Grandma and Grandpa so the generations can know who these people were. And that's the story.
What a great book. When will it be available, and how can people get it?
Well, it'll be available on Amazon.com. A lot of people who have read it, who've had moms and dads that have been stricken with Alzheimer's or dementia, tell me that they really now begin to understand what's happening in Grandma's brain. And we took a different approach. Rather than do the typical brain cross-section, I work with the artist, and we design highways in the brain. And there's a brain of one of the little girls and the brain of Grammy. They both have highways, roads, but the girl's brain, everything is green and go. Grammy's brain is full of no left turns, do not enter, stop, no right turns. So all of the messages that need to come from our brain get screwed up, and we can't function. Great illustrations, though. Wonderful illustrations.
Well, say goodbye, Dan.
All right.
Time for us to go.
Thank you for joining us. And by the way, if you didn't hear all of today's show, you can go to recalculating.biz, and you can pick up this show and past shows to expand your knowledge as becoming more successful entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for being with us today. From Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.